All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Kyle Shelton. I'm the director of the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota and the principal investigator for the MATI program, the Mobility, Access, and Transportation Insecurity program. It is great to have you all today. Folks are still joining, so I'm going to do my slow-rolled introduction. We're very excited for today. Just a reminder, this is sort of a pre-RFP. The request for proposal for MATI is not yet available, but we wanted to start sharing more about what the program is and what folks can begin to consider and think about as you all think about potentially applying to participate in this program. So I'm going to walk through at a high level what the program is going to be. This will not get into the details of what the RFP is and what those elements might look like. So there may be some questions you all ask where I have to say that's TBD, and we'll be able to answer your questions after the RFP is out. But today we hope we can share a little bit about what the program is, what its motivations are, and talk to you about the high level sort of structure of where it is headed. And then at the second half of the program, I'll share the agenda here. We actually would like to do a little bit of a public listening session with you all to hear from you on a couple key questions about what may be contained in the RFP. Again, we're going to ask some questions and I won't be responding to you directly on those, but we will be recording what your opinions are on some of those questions, and they may be able to find their way into the RFP. We wanted to make sure, as I'll talk about more, that folks who are looking and paying attention to this call also have the opportunity to shape some of what the program is asking for and looking for. So again, sort of a two-part agenda for today. The overview for MATI itself, allow some time for questions from you all on the webinar around the program itself, and then some public listening sessions, questions as well. A couple housekeeping elements. We are recording, as Beth said, and we are also captioning this program, and we will be posting both the recording and the captions, which will include the questions and answers, to the MATI webpage, which there'll be a QR at the end of the presentation. I'm also going to ask Beth to put it into the chat now so you can have that page. So the way that we're going to work through this process is if you can use the Q&A for questions about the program itself. When we get to that questions period, we'll be tracking that, and I'll try to answer as many as we can. And then again, we will post those questions and answers on the webpage if it's pertinent in terms of information to share for everybody. And then when we move to the listening session, we're actually going to stop recording because that's not information we're going to be sharing more broadly. It's just for our internal purposes. And when we move to that information session and listening session for the RFP, we're going to ask you all to put your responses into the chat, not the Q&A. So we'll remind you when we get there. Beth will be prompting with different questions as we move through them. But thanks for sticking with us on a couple different formats here so that we can make sure we have information to share with everybody and get y'all's input on the RFP itself. And I was remiss in introducing Beth Andrews, who's the MATI program manager and also a part of the Center for Transportation Studies. I will talk about our broader team and the structure of the program as we get into the presentation. So the MATI program really focuses on transportation insecurity. And before I jumped into that, I wanted to just share a little bit about how we are thinking about what transportation insecurity is. There's a lot of words on these slides also because we'll be posting them for the folks who are unable to attend today. So I probably will not say every one of these words, but it is a little in the details. And so I wanted to make sure folks who might be visiting this program page in the future can see that. But generally, transportation insecurity has a range of ways to think about it, right? It's the inability to reach needed destinations in a timely, safe, and comfortable manner, right? That can look different for lots of different folks as they are traveling through their days. It may include missing trips or not even taking a trip because you are not confident in your source of transportation, or the friend or family member you depend on for transportation was unable to take you that day. It's often compared to or talked about in the same way that we talk about food insecurity, where a person or a family may not know where the next meal is coming from. We're approaching transportation insecurity in a similar vein, with the idea that some folks just don't know how they will make those needed trips or when they'll be able to arrive at a needed destination. And I think fundamentally, transportation insecurity is about missing or limiting opportunities that folks have and experiences they may try to pursue but not have options to access because of inadequate systems or limited resources that they can devote to mobility and transportation. So that's what the MADI program is oriented towards trying to address and trying to close the gaps around. The Center for Transportation Studies is the lead of the MADI program. This is a newly funded program from our partners at the Federal Transit Administration. The university will be administering it along with our MADI program team, which I'll give you an overview of later in the presentation. Again, I'm the principal investigator with the Center for Transportation Studies. My co-principal investigator is Professor Ying Fan from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs here at the University of Minnesota. The program is an attempt to solicit and support community up ideas. So this is a little bit of a different approach than FTA and partners have taken in the past, where it may start with an agency, for example. This is really reaching out to community applicants and coalitions to ask what are ideas that you all have around addressing transportation insecurity, what are particular priority populations in your area or that you work with that you say, hey, we have this issue around transportation. We think we also have a novel idea to potentially close or address that issue. And this is a program that is intended to solicit those ideas from you all and support you through the process of developing a plan and then potentially developing that plan into a pilot program. And again, I'll talk through the steps of what the program is going to look like in a moment, but really want to reiterate that this is looking for innovative solutions across the mobility transportation spectrum. There will be a data collection and research evaluation stage that the MADI team will be supporting communities in, and I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like shortly, but I also wanted to highlight this is about the demonstrations and potential gap closing on the community side and also the evaluation research on the MADI program side, so that we can also talk about what are the elements and interventions that were scalable? What are the things we would share from the MADI program? What learnings might we pull out from the demonstrations that do go that can be shared with FTA and broader partners to inform future projects? So the research evaluation part on the MADI program side is a big part of this as well. And then another thing to flag is that this is not intended to be limited just to traditional transportation approaches, right? This is not just a transit program. This is not just a bike, walk, drive program. What we're looking for is thinking about the interconnections across multiple modes, across multiple systems. We'd love to hear from housing groups that are talking about the mobility challenges that their residents might have, or healthcare groups that are saying, hey, you know, folks getting access to our clinics are challenged in these ways. So we're looking for interventions that cross those sectors, may, you know, answer questions that are primarily a public health question before they're a transportation question. We want to see what ideas folks have. There may be agency-specific ideas that are about connecting services or connecting internal systems in a way that would serve clients and serve those traveling better. It's sort of an all-comers approach here for the MADI program, and we're really excited to see what folks are going to propose as the RFP comes out. A little bit about what the process is going to look like, and I'm going to reiterate this a couple times to clarify how it's going to look. But what we're talking about today and what we're building towards today is an initial request for proposal and request for participation from applicant coalitions, hopefully many of you on this call. The way that this is going to work is that we will post that RFP, and it'll likely be in the early part of next year, calendar year 24. Our goal is to give a lot of time to respond to that, so we'll talk more about the timeline shortly. But applicant coalitions will respond to the RFP, proposing a demonstration, talking about what you are aiming to do, which priority populations you're working with, why, what challenges they are experiencing, things like that. There will be a review of those initial proposals that have been submitted to the RFP. From that initial group, we will select phase 1 sites. The final number is TBD and will be shared in the RFP, but it'll be a smaller subset of the groups that are applying. Those phase 1 sites will then have about 9 months to work with the MADI program team to develop a full demonstration plan, justifying sort of what is the idea for the transportation intervention, how are they talking about the populations that they're hoping to serve, what do they intend to do with it in terms of outcomes. And it will be a whole plan to say, here's what we would do if we receive additional funding for the demonstration. That is the deliverable for phase 1 for the community applicants. The community applicants selected for phase 1 and developing those plans will submit them to the MADI team. and will compete in the second round of review for selection into phase 2. So again, you'll be selected into the phase 1 from the initial RFP. Once you develop your plan, there'll be a second competitive review of that smaller subset of communities. And from that smaller subset, phase 2 sites will be selected. So it's a 2-step process to get to the demonstration. Again, a smaller subset of the phase 1 sites will be funded for 2 years of demonstration deployment. And again, will be supported by the MADI team through that. I did want to talk a little bit about roles and what this could look like. And again, all these slides will be posted. So if I go through fast, you can certainly ask questions, but we'll also these will be posted and can answer questions afterwards as well. But just wanted to kind of talk through sort of where roles will fall. If it's green, it's sort of the primary responsibility of that entity. If it's yellow, it's sort of a secondary entity. Beth, yeah, see your question.
Just wanted to flag that there was a question in the chat, if you want to take a look at that.
Great. Yep, I will save that until the Q&A. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and if you want to, you're welcome to record other questions in there ahead of time, and we'll revisit them when we get to the Q&A. So funding obviously is coming from the Federal Transit Administration to the University of Minnesota, and then we will be working with the selected communities along the way to get funding out to them. This is through a cooperative agreement, so most costs are reimbursable. These are not likely to be classified as grants to the communities, so that'll be something we'd work with the communities to streamline. The program management as a whole will be managed by the University of Minnesota, obviously with support and interface with FTA as needed throughout the program. Importantly, applicant selection for both phase 1 and phase 2 will be run and will be limited to only the MADI program team. Neither FTA nor a research committee, which I'll talk about briefly in a moment, will have a say in which sites are selected. The RFP will contain evaluation criteria and big ideas that we're talking about around evaluating, but the MADI team itself will be making those selections. Plan development is where the applicant community's work really begins after the proposal. If you're selected, that will be that 9-month process where the community applicant will be the lead with support from the MADI program team throughout. Similarly, if a community applicant moves into that phase 2 and is actually deploying their demonstration, the community applicant would obviously be the lead for the deployment and the management of that program, but again, would have support from the MADI team, answering questions, helping think about how to execute the program, things like that. There is a data collection component that we will be asking the applicant communities to help the MADI team put together. The MADI research side of the team will be helping identify what the data collection needs will be and what requirements we would give to community members. The communities will be resourced to do that data collection as a part of the funding for the program. But obviously, our team will not be able to be on the ground in all of the deployment sites all of the time doing the data collection. So we will be looking to the local partner in the demonstration sites to help with the data collection. But then the MADI team and the research side of that team, led by Professor Fahn and others, will be supporting applicant communities in the actual collection and shaping of what that collection looks like. And then similarly, the research and evaluation will be led by the MADI team. So there won't be responsibility for the communities to take the data collection and turn it into final reports and evaluations. That'll be led by the MADI team. And then finally, obviously across this program, we want to be making sure we're getting feedback and have guidance from both the communities, where I would frame that as sort of a secondary thought of like, as a community gets into site 1 and site 2, or phase 1 and phase 2, if there are things obviously that we can improve, we'll keep getting feedback from those sites. We also will have guidance throughout from our partners at FTA, and then also the MADI Research Committee, which is made up of a great group of folks that is available. You can see who that is on our MADI website. That group has been helping us think through the framework for this program, has helped us think at a really high level about what types of programs and projects we should do, and has also provided answers to our listening session questions that you all will be seeing later today. So running through some of what, again, I hit on already, but just to make sure it's really clear, selected applicants will have support from the MADI team in the development of plan and potential demonstration. And the MADI team will also evaluate and share research findings from these demonstration sites with some assistance from the local sites. Again, at a high level, there at the moment, the MADI program is just one round of funding that we're describing today. The way it was stood up and the way that we're proceeding at the moment is that this is a one-off program at the moment, and hopefully we can be wildly successful and see future funding in one form or another. But this call is for one round of funding with 2 competitive selection steps. So this initial RFP is the only slated RFP for the MADI program. Applicants will apply and respond to the proposal, and then within the selected communities that are selected in phase 1, from within that group of communities, there will be a second competitive proposal for the full demonstrations. There's $4 million to support this 2-phase approach to communities. Those are the dollars that will go to the selected sites. Phase 1 awards will be smaller. Again, that's slated to be about a 9-month process once folks are in phase 1. The dollars coming to the phase 1 communities will be there to support the staff time and engagement and planning requirements needed to develop that plan as a part of that phase 1 deliverable. And then the phase 2 awards, which are the awards to do the demonstrations themselves, will be larger and enable the communities to pursue their demonstrations. The MADI program team support is separate from the dollars that will come to the communities. So the dollars that are coming to the communities are there to support the communities in developing the plan in phase 1 and to deploy the demonstration in phase 2. So the MADI team is not a part of the budget the communities will have to create. Speaking of the MADI team, here's a quick breakdown of what that looks like. Again, the Center for Transportation Studies in the University of Minnesota is the lead, with myself and Professor Fahn from the Humphrey School as PI and co-PI. We have the support of a great team, including members of the Tool Design and the Center for Neighborhood Technology. You can see that both Tool and CNT will be helping us in both arms, the research and the demonstration and cohort support. We're really excited about the team that we have together and the depth of knowledge that we'll be able to bring and support the communities with. But the entire program will be managed through the University of Minnesota with many touch points to the Tool and CNT team. And you can see again that MADI Research Committee, which includes our partners from FTA, are sort of our guidance and sounding board throughout this process, and excited to have that group working with us as well. So the RFP timeline generally, again, we're aiming to release it in January of 2024. All of you who have signed up for this webinar are also signed up for the alert emails. If you would like to make sure somebody from your organization is able to do that and get those alerts, please again visit that website. We'll have the QR at the end of this presentation, and Beth has put it into the chat. And that will get you on the mailing list to be alerted to the RFP. Submissions to the RFP, again, we're going to try to give as much time as possible because we want communities, part of the conversation today is getting you all starting to think about potential partners and ideas. We also want to make sure that the coalescence of those coalitions has time, as sometimes these proposal processes can be really truncated. So TBD on the final dates, of course, but we're hoping to give at least 4 full months after the posting of the RFP for submissions to be sent in. We will have further informational webinars and Q&As particular to the RFP in January and February. So again, you'll know when those are, and they'll be posted through the MADI page. We are also planning on holding sort of weekly office hours in the later stages of the RFP, February and March. If you have specific questions or other things you need to clarify, those office hours, the questions asked there and the questions asked in the informational webinar, will be shared and posted on the MADI page. So it won't be, if you're not able to come to office hours or you want to see the types of questions folks are clarifying, we will be sharing that information with everybody on our page. I should have noted at the beginning as well that we're aiming to have our information as accessible as possible. So most of the information on the MADI page will be shared in an HTML web version so that folks can use Google Translate to go to any of the languages available there. But we'd also ask you to flag for us if there's other accessibility approaches that we could have to support you all. And then finally, the goal for review and selection of round 1 is late spring 2024. Overall, just a program timeline. After the phase 1 is selected, we'll begin to execute those agreements with those communities and develop the plans in that sort of 9-month period. That brings us to basically phase 1 happening between summer of 2024 through winter of 2025. Then there will be another internal to the MADI selected phase 1 sites, another competition for the demonstration sites. That is intended to happen in spring of 2025. And then the phase 2, the actual demonstrations themselves, would be developed and deployed in the summer of 2025, and the funding should allow for them to run for 2 years into the summer of 2027. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if you have questions. And again, please put them in the questions and answers, and we'll go. We have at least about 10 minutes before we go to the listening session. If there are more that you all keep coming, we'll go for as long as we can, while also still giving some time to the listening session here. So please drop those into the Q&A, and I will be answering them as we go. So a question about considering midstream community level interventions like community planning versus direct service. If I'm interpreting that correctly, certainly, I'm not sure if I'm interpreting correctly, if it's about ongoing projects or if you just mean in terms of where it sits in a process. If it's ongoing, we're not limiting, we don't want to limit what folks are proposing. I think if you're proposing on an ongoing intervention, you want to be really clear about what's different about it, and talk to us about why it's a fit for the MADI program. If you're talking about where it fits into sort of the planning and execution process, which as I'm reading it more is maybe what you intend. Again, we are not saying it can be midstream, it can be higher level. So it could be something that's directly working with the community and saying we're providing X service. It could be something that's saying we want to improve this higher level interaction that happens between the city department and a transit agency, or a community and a transit agency, or we want to streamline a process that individuals go into to get benefits or to access a service. So we are open to proposals on all comers, and you'll see more definitions around that once the RFP comes up. Are we encouraging a multimodal approach to include demand response, and are we open to private sector participation in providing rides within a single metro-wide tech platform? So multimodal approaches, including demand response, certainly, those are all valid ideas to investigate. Again, we're very purposefully making the types of projects that could be responded to, or that could be proposed, very broad. As you'll see in a moment when I ask about the RFP listening sessions, we haven't concluded particular partners at this stage, so we're open to all of those suggestions, including the possibility of private sector participation. I see a question about eligible parties. Again, we'll ask a question about that in a moment. I can't share the details since this is more of the high-level programmatic piece. We are, just like the proposals themselves and the projects we're going to see, we're hoping to have a wide variety of eligible participants, typical to the types of programs that you all have participated in or proposed on before. So again, we're trying to cast a pretty wide net. So while I can't detail exactly who's eligible at this point until the RFP is out, our goal is to, again, make sure we have coalitions that are able to propose a range of projects and interventions. Also a question about specific numbers of awards. I'm gonna leave that as TBD until the RFP is out, so that we can share specific numbers and specific funding allocations. It will be in the ballpark of no more than 10 for round 1, but again, we'll reserve the kind of detail for that, and obviously a smaller subset for round 2. So stay tuned on that. Good question about definitions of transportation insecurity. I'm going to ask the person who put that in around excessive costs and time burdens to share that in a moment when we get to the chats. Thank you. Again, a few specific questions around eligibility specifically, and I'm going to ask y'all to stay tuned for the RFP itself to confirm. But again, on that note, we are hoping to cast a really wide net about who would be eligible to serve on a coalition and be a partner on a coalition. There have been a couple questions about what we mean by a demonstration project. So demonstration and specifically, there are a few questions about researching transportation insecurity. So the demonstration projects are not intended to be research projects outside of what the MADI team would be researching and evaluating. So it's a great question. Appreciate it. A demonstration project in this case is the actual deployment of the proposed intervention. So a community applicant will be applying and saying, we have this proposed idea for an intervention that deals likely with transportation. As I talked about, it might be a housing angle that has a transportation angle, right? So I don't want to specifically give an idea of a demonstration project because we want to be really broad. But let's just say you have a micromobility proposal and you say, here is what we're broadly doing. You would be in phase 1 developing that plan in great detail, and in phase 2 you would be deploying that demonstration project. And so when we say demonstration projects, it's the phase 2 projects where they're actually being put out into the community with the service provided or with the action provided from the plan. And then the research evaluation component of that will be conducted by the MADI program team with the support and data collection aid from the local communities themselves. A question about the timeline, so I'm going to go back for that just so I can show that visually too. So the RFP timeline, again, in early 2024, we will release the RFP. There'll be a good chunk of time before those are due. The selection for that will happen in late spring, likely May of 2024. And then this is the broader program timeline. So phase 1, those are the first subselection of folks who will be brought into the program. They will have roughly 9 months to do their work after they're contracted with the University of Minnesota. So we're estimating that to be summer of 2024 to winter of 2025. Sorry, I should have put summer of 24 there. And then there'll be a recompete for that smaller subsection within to do the demonstration funding, and that funding is slotted to run for 2 years between roughly the summer of 2025 and the summer of 2027. And yes, a good question. Sorry if I'm using too many definitions or too many different versions to describe this. A pilot project and a demonstration project are the same thing. I misspoke if I was calling them pilot projects. I was trying to call them all demonstration projects. So thank you for flagging that. There's a question as well about a local match, and I can share from the program structure itself. Again, this will be detailed more in the RFP, but the program was proposed without a match requirement. So the idea would be that both phase 1 and phase 2 are supported from funding from the MADI program and through the management of the university. There will be some discussion about the sustainability of proposals when you get to phase 2 applications, but especially for phase 1, there will not be a match requirement as a part of this program. And again, a question about how many demonstration projects. Ooh, you almost got me to say pilot projects again. Demonstration projects. That will be determined. Again, there will be more details in the RFP itself about the potential range for those numbers of pilots, number of demonstrations. But that will also depend slightly on what types of applications we have and what decisions the MADI team makes at each phase around what resources we have, what projects have been proposed, and the funding choices made. So I can't share a definitive number at the moment. The RFP will give you a range and budget for both of those steps. And a good question about, again, the language of demonstration versus pilot. It's something we've talked a lot about, and we'll describe more in our RFP, and happy to continue to engage with folks on this. I think part of the idea of calling it a demonstration project is we don't know what's going to come in the door yet. And so some of it may be continuity of existing programs and projects and developing new steps to those. Some of those may be new innovative approaches and pilots, but wanting to frame it more as a demonstration rather than saying saying we're only considering all new novel things, for example. There's a funding question, so I'll break that down again. The details again for the $4 million. The specific details for the phase 1 and phase 2 will be available once the RFP comes out. But the $4 million is to support the entirety of the phase 1 and phase 2. Again, a majority of that funding will be reserved for the phase 2 deployments, because we want to make sure those projects are realistically funded and supported. And we also plan to right size the phase 1 work to ensure that the applicants applying have the resources they need to execute the planning stage. I cannot answer the question about FTA funding after 2-year projects. We know that our goal will be to work with our applicant communities to find sustainable paths for successful elements, whether that includes FTA, local sources, other opportunities. I think this is a new program that we'll all be learning together on, including the FTA. And so certainly hopeful from our end that we find some really innovative interventions and hopefully things that can be scaled and talk about funding from various fronts in the future. But certainly at this point, the only funding and programmatic approach that exists is this existing system. There is not other funding planned at the moment that I'm aware of. All right, it seems like we've slowed down on the Q&As. You are welcome. Beth and I's contacts will be at the end of this presentation, and we welcome additional questions. And again, once the RFP is live, we expect there'll be many opportunities to continue. Beth, one intervention.
It's possible you answered this and I was just monitoring, but Amy had a question about the definition of folks with transportation insecurity. Did you get to that one?
Yeah, and Amy, thanks for that. I'm going to ask you to put that into sort of our feedback for the listening session so we can make sure to consider that. Because again, our definitions for some of these things, particularly for the RFP, are still open because we want to make sure we're getting insights and input from you all and others. So yeah, thanks for asking that, Beth. And one last question here before we shift to the listening session. So we're looking for ideas on how to transport people around to fill existing gaps. So yeah, that's certainly one way to think about it. Again, we're not framing it. We won't be framing it in such a detailed way to say this is exactly what we're looking for in terms of that transport to fill existing gaps. That's certainly an angle I think that a proposal could take. And again, we're planning on casting a very wide net about eligible coalition members and eligible project types. So to the question about where ideas can come from, we certainly don't want to limit that. And our hope is that we cast a wide net so that innovative ideas and new practices and processes can come from many places and find a good applicant coalition home. Great, so I'm gonna pause on the Q&A for now, and we are gonna shift to the listening session. Appreciate all those great questions. Again, please